Your, best tip you think you could pass on to someone who would be starting for next year?
I think don't be afraid to practice. I know practice, usually means that you're burning AWS credits or, you're paying it, but there are ways around that, local training and different ways of doing that. But I think you need to practice and try any models. Some models really would surprise you. And the whole sim to real thing is really real. And it means that, models that are great virtually may suck on the real track and vice versa. So don't be afraid to experiment and try. And I think that's the main point.
I would say talk to other DeepRacer fans, because when you're talking to them, there's always new ideas popping up. Let me go home and try this amazing thing, and let me look at if this actually works.
Yeah, I would say that if you haven't done well enough, in your opinion, you probably haven't failed enough times. So just keep trying other things. I think what it actually encourages you to do is actually try some random things and see what happens. Fail time and again, make conclusions and then draw conclusions and then think how to improve further on. And yeah, talk to people, get their ideas, assemble them, make your own out of them.
I think talk to people is my recommendation. There are just so many things you can tune and tweak with reward functions and action spaces and hyperparameters that surely somebody's tried a little bit of it and can give you some feedback and save you $100 of credits.
Okay, thanks for that. Any questions from the audience at all? No. Okay, I'll go for another question then. So when you first got started, what was there anything in particular you found particularly difficult to get your head around that that eventually you were like, now I got it, and now I can do it, that you could pass on?
Right. I think it took me a while just to understand how the car does it. You train the car online, and then you have access to the waypoints, X and Y, all of these things, and then you just run to the track and it just works. I'm like, how does it know? And I think whaling is it helped me understand, finally realize, so there's a simulated camera, it links this to this. So just understanding how the training relates to the actual physical execution of the model is something that took some time for me to understand.
I guess what was hard for me is to understand the input parameter and how the car is actually using it and how we can actually use it to control the car.
I think what I had is I did a pretty decent lap in May virtual race, and I thought I was just nailing it and couldn't replicate it. So the main difficulty was understanding what was going wrong and why I wasn't doing it well. The moment I actually understood that it was just pure luck and my model wasn't as good as that's when I started improving.
I think my biggest obstacle was I knew where I wanted the car to drive, and I kept trying to tell it where to drive. And that's not something that works directly with machine learning. You're trying to reward it and let it figure out how to drive. So for a long time I was very over-prescriptive about turn here, do this, go this speed, and it just doesn't work in the end.
Excellent. Any questions from the audience? Yes, we have one. Excellent.
So what do you think would be the roadmap that people should follow for 2020?
Anybody want to ask? I don't know. We haven't planned for that yet. It takes a lot of dedication and time and effort to actually go through this. It's been a great experience so far. You really have to put your mind to it in 2020. I'm not sure if I'm up for it yet.
I would say start reading the documentation about the new console and how is it different from last year.
So the 2020 season will be slightly different, as in there will be no runner-ups in the virtual league, but there will be 24 races. So it's either you win or you don't get anything. This will be way more challenging, and I think what this means is that you really just need to find the point at which you will push really hard And well, if you make it, then it's fine. If not, it might be that you won't have the energy to do anymore. That's my fear. But yeah, we'll see what comes up.
I think the additions to the 2020 races is going to open up a lot more variables, things that you can tune. So it will be a lot harder to just try 5 or 10 different experiments and come up with something that works. Somebody will probably beat you. So I'm probably going to take a step back and build a whole bunch of tooling around analysis and evaluation, besides just looking at a training graph. There will probably be a whole set of tools beyond that to see how training is progressing.
And I think from my side, I haven't quite got my head around how you're going to build a reward function that will accommodate other cars on the track and obstacles. And even with entropy, you get enough randomness bring into it that it doesn't quite always do what you thought it would do. And when there's another variable of randomness, another vehicle driving around, it's a double whammy, which I think is just going to make training a lot harder. So I'm intrigued to sit down, have a play with it, and just see how it actually pans out next year. Yeah, it could be quite hard.
But yeah, I just think that it's not that you will not have chances if you don't do the special tooling. Sola, who just broke the world record a couple of minutes ago with 8-second lap on the 2019 track, she's training purely in console, so she isn't using any special tools or any special environments, and yet she's still just leaving everyone way behind. So it's not that you don't have chances, just keep trying, keep learning, and even if you don't do as well, you'll win because you'll learn.
Okay, do we have any other questions in the audience at all?
Don't be shy, guys. Just throw them out.
Okay, so I'll ask another question then. Forgetting Evo and the new extra variables, we'll just stick with what we know in terms of 2019. So of course, action spaces, reward functions, the track, the time. Is there one particular thing that you've spent more time playing with, experimenting, and similarly, is there one that maybe you want to experiment with more next year going forwards?
Right. I think, out of all of these, I can understand them except for like the hyper parameters, because those are the things that you really need to experiment with. And I think I was lucky enough to go into the AWS forum, like their online official forums, and find somebody suggesting to play with the epochs and the learning layer to increase learning. And that finally gave us a perfect set of parameters that allowed us to iterate quickly. And then we could move our focus to the reward function, etc. But once we found a good reward function, now our challenge is how do we make it stable? And one thing that we haven't played with yet is how do we tweak the hyperparameters to have a better training, a better trained model that will be more resilient to the changes, more resilient when you transfer it to the physical world.
I think Muhammad answered my question as well.
I think I just underestimated hyperparameters this season. So I mainly focused on shaping the action space and rewards, and this worked pretty well. But I was only altering like 2 hyperparameters all the time, and all the rest was just left on default. I think that this is something that actually made the difference between being today at the tracks over there and being here and talking to you.
What was the question?
So the question was, of course, all the different variables that you've got to play with, which ones you found you spent most time on and least time?
I definitely spent the most time on reward functions. I wrote a lot of code, probably 1,000 lines of reward code, where we have winners in MGM right now who have 20 or 30 lines on their reward function. So I played with a lot of different things, and probably most of it is throwaway. Yeah.
Good. Any questions they want to be thrown in? Yeah, question there. Great.
What are the real-world applications from what you guys have done this year? I mean, how do you apply what you've learned and excelled in and experimented in your real life? How has that helped you?
Who wants to start?
Right, so that's the most difficult question. Like, everybody asks that. Well, I mean, with DeepRacer, you get started with an understanding of machine learning. It pushes your, inquisitive nature to what is machine learning, what types exist. I know we're, we're focusing on reinforcement learning, which right now it may not have a lot of applications in our minds. But I know, like at reInvent, there are a few sessions that talk specifically about how do you apply RL into resource allocation problems. How do you do this? How do you do that? So our focus, at least within our company, is to drive that conversation about, let's go back at AWS, talk to their experts, find out how other clients are doing this, and how can we add value to the business. We don't have any specific examples yet. This is still an emerging feature, within our company. So.
Actually, so one thing to realize is what powers DeepRacer is actually deep lens. So I actually just went to this session called Deep Composer, and they had example there, like you can have deep lens read children's book to children, or you can have deep lens detecting if your cat is bringing a dead animal. Yeah, right? Yes, so there are... Yeah. I'll repeat it. So basically, I went to the session. They mentioned that he has a cat and kept bringing dead animal from the yard through the kitty door. So he had the deep lens there, detecting if the cat is bringing a dead animal back. And every time the cat brings the dead animal in, it will like shut the door. Yeah, it will shut the door.
And it also donates to an animal welfare charity as well.
Yes. So eventually, his cat stopped bringing the dead animal, basically. So there's a lot of room to be creative here, right?
There is.
Yeah.
But in that particular example, that's a supervised learning challenge. To get that to work, the guy had to tag 20,000 pictures of a cat coming, cat going, cat with prey, cat without prey, no cat, to get that to work. So yeah, that was a lot of dedication. Yeah, absolutely. And the problem for him, and it was a learning problem more than anything else. I think to answer your question from my side, there's a few applications. In reality, there's no business application that I can think of just yet. Like, the closest thing would be perhaps for Amazon parcel deliveries. But if you've seen like the cars driving on the track, I wouldn't trust them to carry anything. Like, not even like who knows. So I think we're way off of it actually being practical autonomous driving. But what it is a great way of engaging tech teams to actually inspire them to want to learn more about it. In a roundabout way, everyone wants to, it's great. Who wants to be a racing driver? It's a fantastic way of having a bit of fun. And maybe some of those developers will go off and self-study. Underneath it, though, the technology of SageMaker and RoadMaker, they have a lot of direct applications to businesses, and it is the same technology under the hood. So once you've got DeepRacer, it's a great way of getting a soft entry to finding out the technology. Once you're comfortable, diving under the hood, seeing what's there, seeing how SageMaker works. And we saw some of the talks earlier from people like Carl, who actually then gone in and altered the actual code of the whole environment to make it run better. So that's how you would take this to be a practical thing from there. Anything else?
Just touching up on this, I've learned that DeepRacer is really good at attracting people and making them curious. But it also has a risk because you can be too curious about racing and not about the machine learning. So I'm actually thinking how we could, once people get attracted, actually disrupt them, just get them away from deep racing a little bit and do more practical approach and more practical applications and try other things around. So from my perspective, I have done no machine learning 6 months ago, 7. And then with DeepRacer, I've learned a thing or two. Now I'm using SageMaker notebooks to actually spin up SageMaker to try things still around DeepRacer. The next steps are actually trying different things and experimenting more and see what happens inside and learning more about how to build things like that. So, yeah.
I agree that the DeepRacer is a little bit contrived and simplistic, but yeah, it uses all the heavyweight tools underneath to accomplish. I mean, you can just look around here in the hall and see all these robots are using the same robot operating system that runs the cars. So there are some direct business applications. For me as a software developer, the most business value I got out of it is the process. Machine learning has its own process. If you're going to deliver production applications that run machine learning, there are all the steps necessary to make a good DeepRacer that are translatable to running, maybe it's an image classifier or something like this.
Okay, any more questions from the audience? Okay, I'll throw another one out there then. So, if you were in charge of the DeepRacer product team for 2021, say, what amazing extra features would you want to throw in to make it, I guess, more engaging, more fun, more take it to the next level?
I think one of the main things, and maybe this goes against the whole, competitive nature of, is to allow teams to participate. I know right now, it's individuals, but like we were from the same company, what I'd love to just like make the team to participate in a league. I know they allow you to do like virtual leagues like now that you can do within your company, but maybe that's one feature of having companies or teams, race against each other.
Yeah, I would say same point of view as Muhammad. Like if you think about F1 race, yes, there's one guy in the car, but there's a whole team behind this. So team play.
One thing I would really like to see, the point of DeepRacer is to get developers curious, to get people to actually start doing machine learning when they are in tech but have done none of this before. I would really like to see DeepRacer go out to schools. I have this vision of using a Scratch-like interface to get kids to go around a maze, and then like something similar, but like drop the code, but have some other way to define strategy for training to see what happens, so that people who are thinking about their future, about choosing it, but are afraid of actually using code, don't have to, and just try things working and see what comes out of it, and maybe then get curious enough to step into this role.
I think they just added the one that I would request, and that's head-to-head. So we can fight each other.
Would you like to add weapons?
The DJI guys have. That's what interested me to come to DeepRacer. I saw the DJI $500 thing. It has Nerf guns or some attachment that you could shoot. So I thought, okay, this is interesting. Today I went to the getting started class yesterday. So this is my first day. One thing, I think this gentleman, he covered something today, and I think for me the practical lesson I got was telemetry. The ability to get telemetry data. I don't know how he did it, but I could see this car being driven just from his graphs. You could see the cornering in, out. I thought, man, this is interesting. Yes.
Yeah, so what's happening is, the way I think we all experience it at the beginning is we see the car go around the track, and with the moment you see it do a nice lap, you see, right, I'm improving, it's perfect. So I think the human nature is very selective. You want to see something in there, so you will see something in there. You will find this pattern over there, and you will think that this is the common one. It's not. Behind the scenes, it's all facts, and the facts are recorded as logs. And this is pretty much where I realized when I mentioned my first race, where I thought I was nailing it, and it pretty much turned out that I really sucked at this. It was just horrible. When I looked at actual stats, there was no way for me to do it. It was actually like 1 in a million chance to get the lap that I got that month. It was just pure luck. And this was the moment when I realized my model was only as good as I could prove it. And yeah, as you said with the telemetry, this is the moment when I started looking at the logs. First, like not really understanding them, then looking more into them, having tools. AWS have provided a basic tool to do this, which is really, really awesome. The moment you actually get the feel of how to look into it, you automatically start just tinkering with it. And like line by line, code by code, command by command, it actually reveals the truth about your model, about your methods, and just verifies you and your tries.
Great. Okay. Any more questions from the audience? We have a question. Excellent. Good.
So this question is specifically for Mohammed.
Lucky me.
So
Yeah.
can you take us through the emotions of physical racing, especially with regards to the summit race and also the championship race, and what are the differences you see between those two?
Oh, between the summit and this one.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
the general emotions of physical racing.
Thank you. No, that's a great question because, for somebody like before the Toronto Summit, we only had a couple of months to actually train models, and Toronto is well known for its AI expert, machine learning. So we went there expecting that it would be good if we just placed in the top 10, and as time goes, we ended up winning. That was great. It was a great competition. We met a lot of the community members there, but the emotion was what? Even though, and I've heard this before, is if you think that you don't know enough to compete, like everybody feels the same way. Nobody's coming there and saying, I'm an expert, I'm gonna win. If they do, then they don't know everything. So, although there's this imposter syndrome of if they're saying, you're the winner, yeah, maybe I don't know, everybody's feeling the same thing. So yeah, we were anxious, excited, and we won. That was great, but then that sets the expectation even bigger. So now when we go to reinvent, it's 10 times that, it's 100 times that, because now you're racing against all the top winners from across the globe, and the expectation is that we don't have time, we're not ready. And then you come here and you find at one point we were just we're happy that we made it here. We're just happy that we've made the summit. It speaks volumes that you were selected, you were able to get in here. So if you don't qualify into the top 16, if you don't qualify into the top 3, just coming here is in its own is a prize and an achievement. And you also find the same thing that even other racers are feeling the same thing. It's what am I doing here? All these, everybody thinks that they're racing against the best machine learning experts. And in reality, there are a few who just do, machine learning every day, which is part of their job, their studies, etc. But for the almost everybody else, it's just a hobby, it's an interest, it's something that they're just getting started in. So, the emotions stand from this to comfort. You slowly begin to comfort yourselves and you're I'm excited about this, and everybody is the same. So instead of just worrying about winning and what's next and the split second, let's just worry about, meeting people, learning, what am I getting out of this experience, and really just being humble and appreciating that you've made it so far. That in itself just gives you that peace that, whatever happens next, it's okay. You've made it this far. Anybody else?
I just want to mention one person over here because Mohammed won in Toronto. There was a man who actually finished second, James Jennings. This is an incredible guy. He also joined the community around the same time as Mohammed, and he worked so hard, and pretty much last minute. And he also did very, very well at the last race, the last virtual race. He took part in many events along the way, improved many things. The dedication he had, he almost made it so many times. I am crushed that he's not here with us racing. Not that I don't want Mohammed to be here. I'm really happy he's here. You're just nothing personal. It's just when we created the community, it was kind of a extension of the excitement that we had during the racing in the tracks in London. And throughout the 7 months, we've seen people come and try and be really disappointed at times, and then frustrated and really angry, and then something worked and they were just flying over there singing songs. You can literally see them, read them, and feel he's singing while he's writing that. So I think that this is the emotions that come from there are extended, and having a community that actually just shares this and understands it makes it resonate even more. So you feel everything that's wonderful, you feel more of it. Everything that's crushing you, I think it just betters you because you get support. Okay, let's try again. And
JJ is I know he was the leader there, and just there is one thing that I've learned so far about DeepRacer is don't let it get into your head. Because everybody's you're the winner, you're this, and truly, even if you watch DeepRacer TV, anything sub 8 seconds is a chance. You go to the track today, and it's the top 16, and people who were scoring 9 seconds yesterday are scoring 10 and 12 and 13 today. There is a lot of inherent randomness, or I don't know what you want to call it. There's so many different factors that you have no control over. Like, me winning or JJ winning could be just like somebody who's pressing the button faster to track our session. So I take no credit in like being better than X and Y, and I think nobody should do that either. Like, at the end of the day, it's a lot of factors that some you have control of, which you do your best, and others you just don't, and it just happens. So.
Okay, any final question? We have a question over there.
Final question on year 2 with the head-to-head racing. Do you see that it'll be a start from scratch with your algorithm models, or do you think you'll be able to adapt what you've currently got? And anybody can start there.
I don't know anybody.
It will be a complete start over, and main reason for that is the amount of sensors. You cannot just do head-to-head racing with a single camera. So just to give you a bit of an idea on what's happening in the car when it's going around the track, it takes a picture, crops it to a certain size, turns it into grayscale. So effectively it pretty much codes the picture as roughly 15,000 numbers, 0 to 255. It goes into a neural network, magic happens, maths, spits out a single number. The number is associated with turning, with speed, and then this gets applied, the car adjusts its behavior to actually do that. If you change the sensors, like have 2 cameras, it suddenly becomes 30,000 numbers. If you add a LiDAR, I have no idea how many variables it will just add to you. So the nice thing that you've got when you're training is you get a certain abstraction of that. You don't need to understand those numbers that are coming into there. But there will be new parameters like distance from an object or an obstacle, or where if something is behind you. I don't remember the exact values or names of the new parameters. These things you need to factor into your reward function. If you go to the console today, there is a one reward function that should work both for obstacle avoidance and for head-to-head racing. And it's a completely different one, much more robust. It has more factors in there and computations. I have no idea what it means really. I had a quick look so far. It's all new learning.
Yeah, I think the hyperparameters and the process of learning will be something that we can carry along. But as far as the rewards in order to train the car, yeah, start over from scratch. There are a bunch of new inputs, as Tomas said.
And I think just to add to that, I think there'll be a technicality that the model, in terms of execution, not so much on training, and in the same way the action space maps to that today, you've got to have the right action space to match what the model was trained for. You will have to match the car definition that it was trained for. So all your models right now will be trained for a 1-camera car, no LiDAR. So if you want to then run that in a car that has 2 cameras and a LiDAR, there's extra inputs that your model physically, structurally won't do. So I don't know to what extent that will be accommodated for, but probably I would start afresh and go from there. Okay, was there something you want to add?
A follow-up question. Do you guys know if it'll be both? So will you use both cameras and the LiDAR, or will it be 2 cameras or a LiDAR?
So what's happening right now, some things have been moved away from the train your model page into something called the garage. In the garage, you define what your car is really. You say what sensors it's using, single camera, 2 cameras, add LiDAR or not. And then you also define the action space associated with this car. And then the topology of your neural network, either 3 or 5 layers, if I remember properly. So some characteristics now are predefined as a car. You also give it a different color of a shell and give it a name. And then when you go into the training model page, you choose which track you go on. And then, if I remember probably, you choose the type of training you want to do against. Then you have some setups on the training conditions, like for instance if you've got bot cars for head-to-head racing, or if you've got some randomly positioned or fixed positioned obstacles, well, many details. And then you choose the car in there pretty much. So you no longer choose the action space. I think behind the scenes it's roughly the same thing, same structure, same files and everything. The logic, like the way it's being described, is slightly different now.
Okay, anything else from the audience before we wrap up the expert panel? No, okay,
That's
thank
the
you.
0 to 12 for speed mean. So there will be no more 0 to 12. It's been fixed now. It's 0 to 4 meters per second as speed in the action space. We've checked today. The structure is just changed behind the scenes. It's been fixed pretty much.
Okay.
Also,
sorry.
sorry, one thing is that the newly trained model in the new console has problem loading into the old car. If the old car software is not updated, you cannot load the new model actually.
Cool. I'm sure we'll discover lots of extra features as we go forwards. Okay, fantastic. Thank you very much. We're going to now move on to the draw.